I've got 3 tools to show you this week that are easily available on Amazon, although I bet most people have never seen them, that are going to make your life easier, your work more accurate, and the best thing about them is they only cost a few quid. So I'm going to start with the cheapest of the 3 tools today, which is this little angle finding jig from Trend, which is just over £6, I think. All the tools you can find on Amazon. I'll put links to all of them in the description below. And did you know I have an Amazon storefront? So everything you see on the Proper DIY channel and on this channel, you will be able to find in the Amazon storefront, where it's split into power tools and gardening tools and painting and just about everything else, including even the cameras and the lighting that I use to produce all these videos. And over the last few years, it's grown into quite a big catalogue. So go and check it out if you want to see anything that I use in the videos at all. Anyway, back to the Trend jig. So this is an angle finding jig from Trend, the sort of thing that you can put into a corner and fix the angle, but it does a little bit more than that. Let me show you. So I've got a little bit of a template here with an angle that I've set up. It's definitely not 90 degrees. I don't even know what it is. It's just some random angle. So this sort of jig is something that you can put into the corner if you're cutting things like skirting or architrave or anything like that, because let's be honest, none of the corners in our houses are actually square. And it's very easy. You just line it up to the corner, open it up to match the angle, and then you've suddenly got the angle that you want to cut. But it does more than that. You see, this little bit of metal here might actually look like it tightens the whole jig to make it stiffer. But it's not for that. It actually rotates, and it rotates at half the speed, should I say, or half of the angle that the jig actually rotates. So if you turn the jig 90 degrees, the metal is now at 45. So how does that help us? Because there's no numbers or scale on this at all. Well, it does help you if you're using a miter saw to cut whatever you're fixing into this corner. So let me just re-establish this angle, and now we need to take this to the miter saw. So this is a piece of wood we want to cut. So now I have to get the angle right to cut our miter. So what we do with this little bit of metal is we hold the angle gauge onto the fence, and then we can change the angle of our setup until it matches, and just try it a few times until it's actually parallel to the blade. Now you know that the blade is exactly set at half of the angle. And I think we're probably pretty close. Okay, so now we take our piece of trim and make the cut. Tightened it all up. There we go, that's our angle. So there's lots of digital angle measuring devices about, but the advantage of doing it this way is that you don't have to, first of all, make sure you've got batteries in your digital device. Halve it. If you're doing this a lot in each corner, all you have to do is set it up and cut the angle. Let's see how we're looking. Now that is pretty good, seeing that I didn't have to measure any angles or do any difficult calculations. You know when you want to round over the corner of a piece of timber, so you go scouting around the workshop looking for something of approximately the right radius, like a 10p piece or the top off of a bottle or something, so you can mark a radius around the corner and then somehow cut it off and sand it down. Well, there's an easier way of doing it if you buy the right type of jig, and it's called a radius jig, and it's actually designed for exactly that reason. You see, this is one half of the set that I bought some time ago, and you can see that each corner has a different radius. There's 10, 15, 20 and 25. So you don't have to find something of the approximate radius. You've already got it in your hand. And there's a couple of ways of using this to make your work even more accurate. Let's find a bit of timber, shall we? This is a bit of timber and the corner that I want to round over. And there's 2 ways of using this jig. Firstly, you can use it just like you would a 10p piece. So we just draw back these adjustable wings here because I want the 25mm radius. Pop it onto there, make sure it's nice and tight, and then with a pencil just mark it like you would using a 10p piece, and then get rid of that corner. Either cut that off or sand it off, or do it however you would normally do it if you'd use a 10p piece to draw around. But there's a better way of doing it with this jig by using a palm router. Let me show you again. So with the jig lined up nice and tight on that corner, there's a couple of ways of doing it. Firstly, if you don't mind holes in your material, these two holes here are actually designed to be able to screw it down. That's probably the best way of doing it, because it means that the jig is nice and tight against a workpiece. However, quite often we don't really want holes in our workpiece. So if I just get a little clamp here, what I can do is just make sure that's nice and tight, and with the clamp just clamp it in place temporarily, and then I can grab my palm router and set it up with a bearing trim bit on it to actually follow that aluminium jig. And there you go, there is your perfect radius, 25mm, cut with a router, nice and clean and smooth. Just needs a little bit of sanding to get that burn mark off. So although you can use a 10p piece or the top of an old bottle, I think just for, I think this is about 15, 16 pounds, you get two of these, lots of different radiuses, everything you really want. I think that makes life a little bit easier, more professional, and I think you get a better result. So the last thing I'm going to show you is a pair of clamps that I've just bought, which are fairly standard quick clamps. These are Jorgensen clamps, or Pony Jorgensen, I think the company is. And they're pretty heavyweight, although they're classed as medium. They're probably bigger than the sort of clamps I'd normally purchase. But they do something that most clamps don't. Let me just take these labels off and I'll show you. So there's lots of features on them that you find on most other clamps, like rubberized feet. They slide really nice and easily, and these ones particularly grip quite well, so you get quite a nice gripping force, but nothing different to most other clamps. However, they do have a couple of things up their sleeves that are a little bit different. First of all, if you want to push rather than to clamp, then this end has to come off. Well, on these ones, all you have to do is press this button here and suddenly the end comes off. So there's no undoing of nuts or whatever. So it's very, very easy to turn it around, slip it on, he says, and then just pop it in. And now you've got a pusher rather than a puller. So that's really quite nice and quite quick to do, which is better than my other cheap clamps. But it has another trick up its sleeve. You see, whenever you do have a clamp, it's never quite as long as you want it. Have you ever found that? So when you're trying to clamp something up like a door, it's never quite long enough. So traditionally what we do is that we use a couple of clamps, and then if I was trying to clamp this workbench up, say, what I'd try to do is to put two clamps together, sort of, so one can push off the other or pull off the other, and I can sort of clamp up the workbench. But with this clamping system, you don't have to mess around with it. You see, it's got a little bit of a trick up its sleeve, and the trick is, what you do is you take off the end, you turn it upside down, you do that for both of them, and it doesn't take very long at all because of this quick clamp system. And then what you can do with these is you can actually join them together, would you believe? So now you've got two clamps joined together. So you've got double the clamping length. So if I open it out, now I've got, well, about 4 foot of clamping lengths. So now I can do it properly rather than bodging it and clamp it up, if I'm using my workshop bench here, to my heart's content. Now that, I think, is a really good idea. And it's so quick that it's actually quite easy to use, and something that I can imagine myself doing. And it's all down to this little quick link here. It doesn't matter which way round it is, one fits into the other. So that's really, really good. And I like the way those get turned around really easy with one quick clip, and you've got your clamp back to where it was just 2 minutes before. So these, I think, are around about £27 for the 12-inch version. The link is in the description below. You can get them off of Amazon. They're really quite heavyweight clamps, and I'm glad I've got those for my workshop. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you next time.